President Obama sitting down today with the Civil Liberties Oversight Group, which claims it has a broad range of questions over those secret programs to track our cell data and much of what we do online. The group is the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. It reports to Congress about how government's anti-terror measures affect our personal privacy. The president nominates each of its 5 members, and he recently acknowledged the board includes some fierce civil libertarians.
And what I want to do is to set up and structure a national conversation, not only about these 2 programs, but also about the general problem of these big data sets.
Well, but critics in Congress say the president is fast losing his moral authority.
It's really a government that is drunk on power. It's a government that has allowed so much power to gravitate to the presidency.
Well, today marks the president's first meeting, as far as we know, with that Civil Liberties Board. Jennifer Griffin is with us from the Pentagon tonight. We're learning more, I guess, about some new reports, or from some new reports in the Guardian and the Washington Post.
That's right. They certainly seem to contradict the assurances from U.S. officials that the NSA goes to great lengths to only target foreigners and guard Americans' privacy.
The new leaks leave no doubt, and there really should not have been any doubt before, but they leave no doubt that the NSA is allowed to pick up Americans' international communications. For the past few weeks, government officials have been trying to defend the NSA surveillance program by saying they're not listening to Americans' phone calls, and we now know for sure that that's simply not true.
The mandate given the NSA is very broad. For instance, it can keep emails and telephone calls of U.S. citizens and legal residents if they contain, quote, significant intelligence. What does that mean? Quote, a person reasonably believed to be located outside the United States or whose location is not known will be presumed to be a non-United States person, according to the NSA rules on targeting of suspects. That means that the NSA would be able to read their emails, Shep.
A non-United States person. I love that. We've also learned that the NSA recently hired a chief security officer from Facebook.
It's interesting. Max Kelly served as the chief security officer for Facebook until 2010. Just a year before, in 2009, is when Facebook started cooperating with the NSA on the PRISM program, allowing them to, in effect, read these emails and these online interactions. And what we have now learned is that Kelly joined the NSA in 2010, and he was recently quoted as saying, quote, commercial entities and the military are dealing with the same problem. He was referring to hacking. They should both understand their roles in the larger picture. There isn't enough information shared. Some would argue, of course, Shep, that these days too much information is being shared.
Yeah, some would. Jennifer, thank you. See you later.
Bye.
There's Chris Wallace. He's in another part of the same building. And Chris, I don't know, have you been watching this show at all lately? Napolitano and I have been listening to these hearings and stuff, and Chairman Rogers of the committee asking the deputy there, do you have the ability to listen to our phone calls and read our emails? And he said, no, we do not have the authority. I don't understand how it is that they keep getting to not answer questions and why they fib to us so much.
Well, in terms of these programs, there may be other programs, but in terms of the phone program, they're only picking up phone records. They'd have to go back and get a separate authorization from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in order to be able to listen to the content of the phone call. All they're getting are this number, call that number, and they were spoke for this many minutes, the kind of thing you'd get on a bill from your phone company.
Yeah, but, you know, that's my bill from my phone company. And sometimes, like the websites I go to, maybe they track me. This company, you know, they can read every email I send. But you know what? I signed a form that told them they could do that. I agreed to that. I did not agree to this with the federal government. They're just doing it. And when Chairman Rogers asked the question, can you listen to our phone calls and can you read our emails? And the answer is one of obfuscation, where he says, well, no, we don't have the authority. That's not to say they can't, because you know damn well they can.
Well, in the case of the privacy of those records, the Supreme Court ruled in 1979 that if you make a phone call you know, let's say through Verizon, and Verizon has that phone record, that you have no expectation of privacy, that the fact of your phone call will be private. It's just like when you take your trash and you put it out on the front step. You have no expectation of privacy that somebody can't rifle through your trash. So you may not like it, but the fact is, according to the Supreme Court, it's legal.
we also they tell us about these 50 terror plots that they broke up, 50 of them, and they hold up as their grand example this plot to blow up the New York Stock Exchange. And when asked, well, you know, was it this data that really brought that down? And the man testifying said, well, you should ask the jury that convicted him. Now we know there was no jury. No jury convicted anybody. They pleaded to lesser charges, and the stock exchange was never even a part of the plea. The stock exchange wasn't even mentioned. It just feels like they're fibbing to us too much.
Well, they certainly aren't coming clean. I agree with you there. General Alexander, Keith Alexander, the head of the NSA, promised Congress that he would get back to them with details on these 50 terror plots that had supposedly been thwarted, at least in part, through these government surveillance programs. He still hasn't gotten back. He may, but he hasn't yet. And it's very interesting. You know, you talked at the very beginning with Jennifer Griffin about the fact the president met with his Privacy Oversight Board today. That sounds very official. It was created in 2004, 5-member privacy board. Guess what? How many times has the president met with this board since he's been president?
None.
Never. This is the first time.
Well, I guess it's a good thing they got around to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there is no more privacy. Fox News confirmed, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, that there is no more privacy, so just forget about it. We found out this week that the FBI does indeed use drones to spy on Americans inside the United States. Now, newly released documents reveal it's been going on for years on at least several occasions. Federal aviation officials released the documents after a Freedom of Information request. They blacked out the vast majority of the information, as they always do, said the government has to keep its secrets. But those secrets began to unravel earlier this week with the stunning admission from the head of the FBI.
Does the FBI use drones for surveillance on U.S. soil?
Yes.
I want to go on to a question.
And well, let me just put it in context, though, in
Sure.
a very, very minimal way, and very seldom.
Very minimal, very seldom. The FBI director went on to say that the feds are still working out the rules for very, very minimal and very, very seldom. No rules yet on that. Just kind of, you know, just do it. Whatever you feel like doing, just do it. It's a process that's apparently taking a long time, this rule-making thing. The documents out today reveal that the agency's been using drones inside the U.S. since at least 2009.
I think the fact that the FBI documents are heavily redacted is incredibly significant. It shows this culture of secrecy, this just pure opaqueness in the way drones are operated in the United States.
The FAA documents make clear that they've been using these drones for the better part of 4 years, but when it comes to establishing some kind of privacy policy, that is still in the works.
We are in the initial stages of doing that, and I will tell you that our footprint is very small. We have very few and of limited use, and we're exploring not only the use but also the necessary guidelines for that use.
And after the release of the FAA documents, the FBI said in a statement the use of UAVs is covered by existing Bureau aircraft regulations and FAA rules, and we have said they are used in limited circumstances to support an operational need. Sort of the big question here, or the elephant in the room, is to what extent this kind of surveillance data gathered on U.S. soil can be retained or held and then cross-referenced with other databases. We now know under certain circumstances the NSA is able to retain data that it collects on U.S. persons, because when you bring these databases together, that becomes a multiplier. In this case, the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts and tells you a lot more about an individual than you can just pick up from a single source, Jeff.
Earlier this month, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Ender Napolitano appeared on this program and said that Ed Snowden is a hero because he exposed details of these surveillance programs.
I would describe this man as an American hero, as a person willing to risk life, limb, and liberty in order to expose to the American people one of the most extraordinary violations of American principles, value judgments, and the Constitution itself in all of our history.
Well, since that appearance, Ed Snowden leaked other information, details about America's secret spy operations against foreign governments, various foreign governments. So does the judge still think of Ed Snowden as an American hero now that he seems to be working with countries including China, Russia, Cuba, and Ecuador? Judge Napolitano was with us. What about it?
I'm smiling because obviously heroes can be flawed. The only hero that wasn't flawed was killed on Good Friday. His act of exposing the American government spying on almost every American was an act of heroism. What he has done since then might not be what I would have done, but that particular act was an act of American heroism, which was lawful because of his oath to uphold the Constitution. I'm glad that he did it, because the American public is entitled to know when the popularly elected government is doing the opposite of what it has sworn to do: uphold the Constitution and preserve our freedoms.
Of course, there are now suggestions that Ed Snowden may have taken that job as a contractor so that he could find out this information, so that he could then leak it. Others have suggested, including Gordon Chang, that he might well be working with the Chinese against the Americans.
You know, no one knows where this is going to end up. Espionage is a very problematic charge for the government to bring. I'm surprised they brought it.
Political.
Sure, the statute, the Espionage Act of 1917, Shep, was a temporary World War I statute that was supposed to last only during World War I. Here we are nearly 100 years later. And it prohibits speech that encourages the enemy or discourages Americans from resisting the enemy. It was arguably invalidated by the Supreme Court in the Pentagon Papers opinion. It's also difficult to prove espionage because in order to prove how your spying apparatus was harmed by what this former spy did, you have to demonstrate to a jury what your spying apparatus is, and the government may end up revealing even more secrets than Mr. Snowden did, in which case we would then say, well, then where's the harm if the government's willing to spill the beans in order to get this guy? On the other hand, it is clear, because he's admitted this, he did give classified information to people who were unauthorized to receive it. Was he morally justified in doing so? A jury will probably decide that. I would think a jury in the United States would treat him better than a jury anywhere else.